Hi everyone, let's get started. So in this tutorial, I've got 20 images that need to be resized. And as you can see, I've got a mix of portrait and landscape images. And all of these images are in different dimensions. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to separate our portrait and landscape images. And we will do that by creating folders. The first folder we'll create is called landscape. The second folder is called portrait. And the third folder, resized. When you've created your folders, we will now get all of our portrait images and move it into the portrait folder, and the rest of our landscape images into the landscape folder. We will now open one image from the landscape folder in a Photoshop and a portrait image also into Photoshop. In this tutorial, we will start with the landscape image. At the top navigation bar, go to Window, Actions. This is the Actions panel. We will create a new set called Image Resizing, and we will now create an action. To help you with naming convention, I'm working with a landscape image, so the first thing I'll do is I'll call it landscape, then I will give it a dimension. So for example, I want to change this to 1920 width, and with the height, with my tutorial, my images were all in different heights. So I can't give it a set height. So I will give it question marks just for my reference. And I'm going to hit the record button. Now, as you can see, this icon changed from gray to red. And it's basically saying that the computer is now recording our moves. The first step we need to do is we want to record the image being resized. So we will go to Image at the top navigation bar, go to Image Size, and I will now change the width to 1920. And now you can see the height is being automatically changed. Now we need to save this image. So we go to File, Save As, and make sure you navigate to your resized folder. And with the file type, you can save it to whatever you want it to be. But in this tutorial, I'll just go for JPEG, save, and choose my quality options. I'll leave it to high, click OK, and once you're done, we'll hit the stop button. So to review what has happened, the computer has recorded two steps in our landscape action, image size and save. We will now do the same for portrait images. We don't need to create a new set because it's already created. We would just create a new action and house it into image resizing. It's like a folder. With naming convention, I will call it portrait. Now, with this situation, because it's a portrait image, the width will now be at the mercy of the height. So I will give it question marks because the images were all in different widths, and I will set it to 1920 height. Hit the record button, and it will now record our steps. We will now do the same thing from the landscape version. So we will go to image, image size, change the height to 1920. The width is now at the mercy of whatever the height is going to be and what its original width was. Click OK, save the images, navigate to your resize folder. I will save it as JPEG, just like in landscape. Quality settings to high, OK, and when you're done, press the stop button again. Now that we have our portrait and landscape actions set up, we can now start the automation process to a batch of images. So to do this, we will now close all of our images and return back to the normal state of Photoshop. We'll go to File, Automate, Batch. Now a panel will open up and you will see three sections: Play, Source, Destination. So play basically means what action to play. Source means which folder to go to based on the action that we'll be setting it to. And when the actions are being applied to the source folder, where does it save to, which is the destination section. So in play, we will now navigate to our image resizing, action. I will start with landscape. So I'll click on landscape. Source. So because we created a folder, make sure that this section is called folder. And we will navigate to the landscape folder. Click set folder. To destination, make sure this is also a folder. And navigate to your resized folder. When you're ready, hit the OK button. So what will happen is Photoshop will now load all of your images and will resize the image and save it based on our settings on the landscape actions. Now when it's done, Photoshop doesn't make it obvious that it's complete, and the only way to find out is if it stops moving, Photoshop basically has finished the automation process, which means we can now do the portrait. Repeating the same process, go to File, Automate, Batch. In Play, change the action to Portrait. In Source, go to Choose. Navigate to the Portrait folder. Destination is already set to resized, so that's okay. And we will now begin the automation process again. And you can see that the portrait images are now being resized and saved. And again, the automation process is now complete. Now we'll go to our folder and we'll check. So we'll go to resized. If we can see that all of the images are here, there are 20. We can check the dimensions. If we can see that the dimensions have been changed accordingly. Now, if we navigate back to our landscape and portrait folders, we can see that the images are original. And this is good because we don't want the images to be overwritten and then we just lose our original source files. So yeah, that's the end of the tutorial. With 20 images, using actions took less than a minute for the computer to automate in comparison to manually resizing images one by one, which could have definitely taken a lot longer. Now that you've learned the actions tool, you can get creative by creating all sorts of tasks. So for example, the one that you learned today, you can create different landscape and portrait sizes, or you can play with other tools on Photoshop and see what you can come up with. So yeah, if you found this useful, like and share this video and this blog. It helps us a lot, and let us know on the comments section if you'd like to see more of these tutorials, and feel free to request topics on Photoshop, and I'll see you on the next tutorial.